so.
No, in the
more about gel coat.
When the fourth round would...
Don't you call in the...
More importantly, he knew what he was talking about.
Well, does it look good already? Okay.
Jumbo Scampi for limited.
All for a price that will make you...
How the hell am I supposed to pay?
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to People for People Radio, the voice of truth in Scotland.
Good morning, everyone. This is Frank Jordan with the World Healers. And once again, we're coming to you and reaching out around the world through the wonderful People-to-People network. And I didn't realize how extensive that network was until I called up People-to-People on the internet the other day. And I'm just delighted with the many connections that we have around the world now. And that our information, our word is getting out to more people. And we do appreciate feedback from our show, because the intent of our show is to help people to gain greater understanding about the ascension process we're going through, the galactic energies that are coming in, some directed from the extraterrestrials, but primarily from the new wave of consciousness that we've moved into in the galaxy, the end of the old era and the beginning of the new. So we welcome that, but sometimes it can be very disquieting because the frequencies are changing and consciousness is changing with it. And the opportunity to change is one of the primary things we like to talk about, because when you understand what's happening, the shifts of consciousness, and when people come to the realization that many of the promptings that are coming to them, that are prompting their changes in thinking and attitude and about how things work and who they are and what their intentions are, we can help to give them assurance that it is natural, that the more attention you put on looking forward to creative thinking and creating an attractive force for the new world reality, the more it can occur, the faster it can occur, and the more we contribute energy to that, the greater the group mind consciousness of the world shifts. And so that's what we're all about. And we're fundamentally, the World Healers is a group of healers that have been working together probably for around 6.5 or 7 years now. And we've gone through many stages of growth ourselves in that process, and growth and understanding. And one of the primary things that I've focused on over the years is understanding the physics of metaphysics. We have a physical world out here, which mentally and emotionally most people are focused on, and they don't really understand the dynamics of what brings this world into form and what holds it there. And people who are caught up in religions and old programming and thinking don't have the information they need or the opportunity for self-realization that there is much more than religion, that religion is and the spiritual truths that those are based on are just a point of beginning. And from that point of beginning, let go of all the old patterns and forms that hold you in form in the old reality, and let go of the controllers and the dominators that would limit our thinking so they could tell us what to think and how to be and act and perform for their benefit. By releasing all that and stepping forward and being receptive and ready for the new information that is coming in, and it has been available all the time for those who sought it. And by internalization of new information and allowing it to work in our systems and our psyche and and the group mind psyche, it does allow it to happen. It helps to make it happen, in fact. And it's all an individual process. Each of us are individually on our own path, but this pool of group consciousness that we pull information from, that has been created for years, for thousands of years now, and is our source of reality and why we're here, that pool of information is changing, and we have to change with it to inspire it, because we created that pool of information and domination force and controller attitude. And when I say we created it, the group mind consciousness has contributed to that by being subjective to that domination force. And that is all breaking down. It's letting us go. We're looking outward and forward and stretching our wings and learning how to fly. And so what we've been talking about in these past shows is bits and pieces of the whole. But there's so much information, we can't give it to you all at once. We can focus on certain subjects and explain that. And each time you listen to our communication, it adds information to you that can either clear or release old information, but it helps you to add to your building repertoire of information and knowledge that is helping you to evolve. And because we are healers, that's one of our primary subjects, because I learned years ago that the healing is really a wonderful base understanding of learning how energy works and how your own system works and how to use energy within yourself, and understand the functionality of our biocomputer, which we are, and how to put your hands on the keyboard and learning how to manipulate your own energies and frequencies to the highest, best good, not only of yourself, but of everyone else that you act and interact with. And so I really like to talk to healers, because healers take their information out and teach others, and this is the way the pool of information spreads and grows into a workable consciousness. But today, because of the subject we were talking about in our last show, we were, I can't even recall what we were talking about now, but we were learning about the indwelling soul, more about what the high soul is and the functionality of that and how it operates our consciousness system. But it reminded me to talk about, particularly to healers, about the low soul and learning and understanding what the soul is that manages our physical reality. And so that will be the subject, the primary subject of today's discussion is understanding low soul consciousness and what the low soul is and how the tremendous effect that it has on our everyday reality in life. Because the low soul, my introduction to it came when I was a healer and working with people and trying to understand and how things work. I immediately learned when I started working directly with a lot of people that most illnesses have a mental trauma or a shock or something patterned into their systems, and this can be ages old or even past life, that it is the basis for the disharmony, dis-ease in the body, that we store every thought, every activity that goes on in us or around us in our system somewhere. And that's what made me realize we're just like living biocomputers, and that the chakra system is the hard disk of the biocomputer. And the frontal lobes of the brain is the short-term memory, which is this software, so to speak, of the biocomputer. and the desktop of the biocomputer, and everything we do or think about or interact with in a linear fashion of information and energy, we relate to our high self and to the frontal lobes of our brain, our conscious reasoning brain. But the deeper levels of the brain are actually the functionality and in a lower consciousness, a frequency range of consciousness that is our low self, that we understand to be the subconscious mind that operates the body unconsciously, and we finally found a name for it, an understanding, and that is that it's the innate system of consciousness that works through the quantum field and supports life, sustains life, and it primarily operates through the DNA. And as I learned how that works by going into it, now I understand that it is nonlinear. It just is. And it brings its source of consciousness and information across from the quantum field of everything out there. And the quantum field is and the innate field is nonlinear. Energy and information and the sustaining forces of life are packets of energy. And we were discussing orbs last week, and how orbs are packets of consciousness energy, and everything in life and everything in form has orbs of consciousness that sustain it. Individually, we are an orb, and every living entity out there is an orb, and it contributes its consciousness to a field of orbs, a huge orb that is the group mind consciousness of every organism, and everything that through DNA sustains life. And but there's an aspect of that for us healers that we need to know. When we begin working with someone else's orb, and by touching their orb with ours, we share and can exchange energy and information to the degree that we have aware consciousness can actually implement healing. And healing is such a broad term in all the aspects of what we can do with our intent and desire and will, and through resonance by transmitting energy frequency and these little thought form packets of energy from one person to another can stimulate healing to bring the person back into order from disorder, to ease from dis-ease. And that's primarily how healing works. Is people who are in the know and knowing can transmit perfection or form into others directly from their own patterns of energy, or we can work with their high selves, their indwelling soul and their oversoul, and bring down perfection energy from the template of consciousness of higher order down into their systems, and to intent, desire, and will, and love and consciousness, incredible things can happen. So that's what many of us, like the shaman and many people out there, are intuitively drawn to do and be, because when healing is, and learning about healing is such an intense tool of learning about yourself and how your systems work. And I've often thought, if I had encountered someone at an early age when I was a cattle rancher, and then during my early years and up to 33 years old when I finally left the ranch, because and went out into the world to see what these promptings I was getting was all about. Because I listened for 10 years after I graduated from college, and an agricultural degree and self-taught. I went into a field of learning through self-meditation and not really understanding what I was doing, I was listening to flows of energy coming into my consciousness. I was listening to my oversoul through all those boring days on a tractor or on a horse or out in the fields alone. I was listening to information that my high soul was imparting to me to prompt me to remember my past lives and the fact that I have been a healer in many, many lifetimes. And so I learned not only physics, but metaphysics by listening. I call it listening, by just stepping back out of the conscious frontal lobe, back into those deeper levels of consciousness centered around the pineal, and listening to this internal information that is available to all of us when we would take the time to disengage from the three-dimensional world. We can step back into the fourth dimension and fifth dimensional reality and past lives and standing waves of consciousness. And it's all about physics. It's all about understanding how things work. And I actually wrote a book writing down my experiences and how I learned and what I had learned in a process called Clearing the Way to Higher Consciousness. And that's what it became the foundation of the work we do now, is just the understanding of how things work, clearing the way to higher consciousness. And for the healers, it's almost like a basic workbook of how to operate your biocomputer and how it works and what to do to reach out and touch others, and what happens when you do put your intent to healing, and how to. Now, I didn't even understand the quantum field at that time, but I know now that the clearing the way to higher consciousness techniques basically it was a bridge into the quantum field in understanding and applying that intuitive information that I had. And that's what this group is, the World Healers, is we've all came through processes of self-realization and learning and evolution of consciousness to the fact now that we can talk about things and to other healers and help them to gain a better understanding and functionality in their intuitive work. Because we're all healers. We all heal ourselves every day and through life, but it's an unconscious, subconscious thing that we don't pay enough attention to. But as we learn to step back into the deeper inner consciousness and listen to our intuition on our oversoul and our past lives and other sources of consciousness, we can utilize all that stuff. It's like an ongoing daily experience of attending the World University and downloading information that we can internalize in association with our information, and it becomes knowledge that we can apply and work with. But anyway, I'd like to talk to you healers about one of the primary things that I learned in my early healing years when I couldn't find other healers, really. I could not find anything to validate what I was doing, except that when I did find a book or people in other techniques and philosophies, it would validate what I already knew, mostly. Because I'd been learning, been going to the University of Greater Consciousness all of my life. And so when I finally stepped out and began not only interacting with people and expressing healing energy, I began to find validation for what I was doing and what I already knew. But anyway, one of the most important things that I learned was how the indwelling soul functions, what our indwelling soul is, and I didn't fully understand it then as I do now. But I knew there was a consciousness, a spiritually oriented consciousness living in this physical body, and trying to relate to it and understand it. and but I did not understand all the aspects of it. And I learned early on as a healer about indwelling entities, or working as people and clearing them of entities. And I learned that the hard way, of course, by downloading disincarnate entities from them into myself, and then having to work to clear that. So that was one of my earliest lessons in healing, was that we're not alone out here, that we're susceptible and subjective to all kinds of forces around us. And intuitively, I began to realize that the physical interactive world that we understand with our conscious mind is only about 15 and maybe 20% of the greater consciousness world that we live and interact in. And so in expanding consciousness and learning how that other 80% worked and what it was, it has been my primary education. So as I learned that I could spontaneously heal people, I learned how to talk to their indwelling souls and their high souls, and work through the high self to clear the mental, emotional shocks and traumas that they had stored in their hard disk that was the actual mental, emotional, spiritual cause of their physical problems. And we learned, my wife and I learned how to deprogram those patterns, and before we actually did an energetic healing, and the healing would always go so much better. In fact, by clearing the mental, emotional, spiritual cause, or the shock, the trauma, the accident, the abuse, or whatever it was that was stored in the physical system, it would clear up and open that system to natural healing. The body would spontaneously heal itself. And Jane was clairvoyant. She could look into the body and see the energy fields and things that we were working with at that time with the clearing away techniques of accessing and clearing energy. And I was clairsentient. I could feel like the energy fields, pardon me, around the physical problem. And I learned to nudge those with my mind, and with intent, flow them out of the body and get them out of the system and deprogram it. And then if we also told the client what we were doing, we could process the mental shock or trauma or their experience with them, and they could do forgiveness or clearing. And most importantly, we were teaching and them understanding of how or what caused their physical problems, and they could learn how to heal themselves, or from that point on, or when they did have a shock or trauma, how to clear that out of their system so that it wouldn't accumulate and become a destructive force to their physical bodies. But anyway, as I tuned into these people and working with their higher consciousness and feeling the location of these things, I could feel more of their systems than I realized and understood what was going on. I was opening up to the self-realization of what a low soul is. And I remember one time I was trying to teach other healers what I was learning and how things were working, and someone came up to me and after the class and said, did you study kahunas? And I said, no, I never even heard of that before. What is it? And they said, and they explained that that's the Hawaiian techniques for healing. Well, that intrigued me, so I went to the library and I looked up kahunas, and there was a whole set of Max Freedom Longs, who studied kahunas and the healing spirituality of the Hawaiians in their natural state prior to when Christians came in and tried to save the poor dears. and almost destroyed one of our most wonderful spiritual consciousnesses on the earth, because it had the purity of being isolated for so long that it really evolved into a wonderful healing technique. Well, what I've discovered was that it was validation for the things that I'd been learning and doing and working with. And another great thing that I learned through studying the kahunas and their energy systems and how they work was about the low self, low soul, that we do have a low soul as well as a high soul. And then when I learned that, I began working with studying my own low soul and how it worked, and came to the realization that this was really the management system of the body, the high indwelling soul that indwells in your head originally, and then with time and clarity evolves into managing more and more and more of the body and the systems. That I learned that the low soul was not an indweller. It didn't come in at the time of birth like the high soul does, and then leaves at death. The low soul evolved over hundreds of millions of years with the genetic consciousness, and it passed from one generation to the next to our genetic systems, our mitochondria primarily. And so the low soul was the living consciousness of all animals, and is associated with genetics and carries the history of our entire lifetime. Well, anyway, it's learning how that worked and coming to the understanding of that. About that time, I went back to the old ranch one fall with my brother, and we always went back hunting up there around. And one night, my brother Don had a heart attack. I mean, it was a full-blown heart attack. But I was right there, and I was able to do healing on him and bring him back into stability. And he actually went down to the hospital the next day and got checked out, and they told him there was nothing wrong with his heart. He at 65 years old, he had as good a heart as anybody they'd ever examined. And so that was very comforting. But an interesting thing happened. Prior to that, a few months, my dad who'd been in a nursing home, had gone in the hospital and died. And Don was with him when he died, and nursed and nurtured him through the last couple of weeks of his life there. Now, I couldn't be with him except initially, and then because I had to go to Arizona and teach a weeks-long healing class with the Ozark Research Institute down there. And so I was gone when Dad died. But when I got back, we went on with life. And during that period, I had the experience with Don. And I noticed when I got back and talked to Don, he seemed different. It's like he's a different person. He was all concerned about the ranch and what was happening up there since we left. And that's really all I could really function and all I wanted to do. Well, after his heart attack, I become very focused and concerned about the ranch, and for a month or 6 weeks, I could barely focus on my new life as a healer, and if anytime I sat down and wasn't really focused through my high self, I was thinking about the ranch and concerned about it and past experiences on the ranch and whatnot. One day, sitting in our living room, my wife was sitting across from me, and she's extremely clairvoyant. And she looked over at me, and she kind of went rigid and said, "My God, you become your dad." And she said, "I can see him in you." And so I kind of went into a shock and thought, wow, what's going on here? And I stepped back and opened up into myself. My dad was in me. His low self had moved into Don when Don was nurturing him through his death process. Dad's low self, his animal consciousness, when he died, moved into Don. And then when I did the healing work on Don, it moved into me. And so I thought, holy crap, this is not good. And so I opened up and asked and got direction from my higher consciousness and the understanding that this is what the kahunas had been talking about when they were talking about low souls and low selves. It's a separate consciousness, and it does not die at death. It simply goes into a morphogenic field of like a low self heaven, where it waits for reincarnation down the family line further in the other children that come. This is why so many kids have early on have genetic memories of their parents and their grandparents and whatnot, those that have passed to the low self. Well, so I became aware, and so I worked with Dad, and I explained to him that it was not beneficial for him to be in my body because I was actually having many of his physical symptoms prior to that time. And I opened a portal and took him through into the afterlife consciousness, the dimension where low souls rest and wait for their next incarnation. And then when I came back out of that, after releasing him, I was clear again. I was totally myself again and felt wonderful. But I got to thinking about this and in my healing work with other people, when I'd go into them clairsentiently and could feel their systems and their bodies and everything that was wrong with them, many times I could feel a denseness that I couldn't identify. And the denseness, in many cases, was the source of their physical problems. And I began to realize that I questioned them, is your parents alive? No, they passed 20 years ago. What was their illnesses? What did they die from? And sure enough, I came to the realization that many of the physical problems that these people were experiencing, particularly older people, they were actually had their parents' low souls in them, living vicariously through them. And so by working with the parents, taking them cross-dimensionally, their low souls back into that morphogenic field of rest and releasing them and clearing them so they could continue their process and progress. I was able to clear up and release a lot of the mental, emotional patterns and programs in the bodies of these people that I was working with, and many times their physical symptoms would just disappear. They would just be gone with the parents. And it wasn't always parents. Sometimes it was a good friend that had died or was killed or something. And so it can be. And another thing I ran into was chronic problems with people who work with hospice workers. They were just loaded up with low souls in the transition process. So I began to study low souls in every way I could, and I could not find much information on it or any information other than what the Hawaiians talked about. But in my own studies, I came to the realization that the low self does not have awareness of high spirituality and of an afterlife or anything. It's a low animal consciousness. It's not even very smart, if you want to know the truth, because it resides mostly in the low survival chakras, and its job is survival. And so, working with it, I was able to finally to tune into those things and go back in their histories and read the past lives of individuals, of their low selves, their genetic progression. I did it myself. I followed my genetic history back in time. That's how I learned to go back in time and could pick out times in my historic progress where I had been a healer or a shaman or a Tibetan monk and many other things that had contributed to my source of knowledge and information as I was evolving. So the low soul passes from one generation to the next through the reincarnation process. It comes in actually when the egg and the sperm join to create a new embryo. That's when the genetic line of on the female side comes into the ovum, and from the male side, the essences of the male can attach to that. And that's what grows the embryo into a child, and so that actually gives the child an instinctive survival pattern or program into Earth mind of the instinctive consciousness, and that's when I began to realize that all creatures, all animals, all species on Earth that has DNA goes through this process, and all the information of their lifetimes is patterned back into the crystalline consciousness of Earth, the silicon dioxide in the crust of the Earth, and that becomes the living low self functionality that supplies information to the new organisms so they can grow and mature into the animal species and whatever they are. And that's instinct. That's our instinctive low self innate consciousness. And that works through the innate side of the with the quantum field that holds everything in form. Well, anyway, I learned when I was doing a reading on a person that had requested healing or mental emotional work or anything, I tuned into them, into their systems, and I could feel whether they had an indweller in them or not. I call them indwellers. And also, I was a dowser, so I'd use dowsing. Before I'd ever go into the person, I'd ask, does this person have any negative entities? Yes. So I cleared the negative entities. Does this person have any low self indwellers in him? Yes. So I'd tune into those, or I'd ask the person actually if their parents had died, and who could have been an aunt and uncle and grandparents are big time involved in this too. And if they said yes, I would ask what they died of. And they could give me many times the physical histories, the illnesses that the parents or the grandparents had. And lo and behold, I could find these things, these patterns and programs in the person themselves, and that was the mental emotional cause of a lot of the things that they came in to heal. Just to give you some ideas about this, I had a heavy smoker come one time, and she just could not break the smoking habit, no matter what she did. And so She said, in questioning her, she had never smoked in her life until she nurtured her dad through the end of his life, and he was a heavy smoker. And when he died, she immediately became a heavy smoker, and it was very detrimental to her health. So and she'd been that way for 3 or 4 years. And so I went into her, and sure enough, there was her father. We talked to him. We did, and I told her what had happened. She's actually smoking for him rather than for her own addictions. And so we cleared the father out through a process I'll show you. And she immediately stopped smoking, and all of her physical symptoms disappeared. And that's just one of 100 things I could tell you about. But that's one of the most dramatic and one of the first ones where I experienced that. So healers, to be a complete healer, always check before you go into someone. And I recommend learning how to douse if you don't douse, because that's the best way to direct your consciousness into someone else and check them out physically, mentally, emotionally, or for the source of their illnesses through yes or no answers and questions. And many times you can clear addicts of severe addictions this way, because the low self, that animal consciousness, is the what it becomes addicted. It isn't the high self. The high self knows better, the high indwelling soul, but the low self becomes addicted because it loves anything sensual, anything emotional. It's very sexual. And that's where the sexual promptings come from. And if you'll remember in yourself in your younger years, how most practically any time you had an open space in your brain where you were mentally focused in higher consciousness on something, you would get sexual promptings, or prompting for a cigarette, or a prompting to eat something. That's all low self stuff. The low self is mostly concerned about what it likes, its addictions and entertainment, and it's an animal. And I've always explained to parents in working with children that their children are literally little animals, because the low self is in control. And if you've ever been around a 4-year-old child, you know they are little animals. And without the training, the programming, the civilizing of the parents or their teachers, they grow up to be animals. They can, with a higher consciousness fighting them every day, because every day, at every moment, is a battle between the high self and a low self over who's in control at this moment of your thoughts and your ideas, and what are you going to do with your life. And so this is really the reason for the clearing the way process, is learning how to go within yourself and clearing the patterns and programs of the low self. And as you clear the low self out, you clear your whole system of negative patterning and programming, and it allows the frequency range to rise into higher levels of consciousness. And that's why I've talked to so many people about the necessity of doing your clearing work, of clearing the low self patterns and programs, not only of this lifetime, but past lifetimes that can be attached and inherent in the genetic systems of the body, and from one lifetime to the next. So we'll spend a lot of time on that other times. Right now, I just want to impress with you, and we'll do that in the second hour. I'll show you some techniques for for healing or clearing low self indwellers out of people, how to identify them and how to get rid of them. Now I want to open up to discussion of the rest of the group to allow you to share your experiences and knowledge about the low self. How do the shaman look at the low self consciousness, Angel?
So there are various techniques, but when we deal with different levels of consciousness, we know when somebody is at a different level of consciousness because either life happens to you, life happens by you, life happens in you, life happens for you, life happens through you, and life is you. So when we get to the sixth level of consciousness, we know that somebody is in a higher level of consciousness. And I don't know if you recall last year when I did the light body surgery on you, Frank.
Oh yeah.
So with the light body surgery, we actually talk to the different parts of the body and what we call the keepers, who hold us in a state of separation. And then I would remove the second lower reptilian soul from inside the spine, if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
That really opened up a different level as well and cleared a lot of things. And I remember when I was working on, I can't remember his name now, the monk who was with us for a while. He had been meditating for 40 years in a monastery and still felt some kind of discomfort on his lower chakras. And then when I did the body consciousness realignment, then he didn't have that pain again. So then removing the crystals that stop us from being clairvoyant, clairaudient, and keep us into the state of separation. And then when we remove all that, obviously we need to integrate the higher light integration, which is a fifth dimensional and above light body integration, in order to invite more light into the body and infusing different light encodements into the DNA, and therefore building a stronger light body, and then preparing the physical, etherical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies for the reunification with the oversoul. And therefore, we are in direct contact with our higher consciousness and all the chakras and all the different dimensions. And then we can recalibrate also the light body circuit and repairing, if there's any repairs to do, removing devices and different illnesses maybe. So that would be what I would do first of all with somebody.
Well, I know when you worked with me, I could sustain my clarity. I could keep my point of awareness above the heart in a set point. And I think what really happened is by clearing those old genetic inherited patterns and programs out of my system, my set point did rise up above the heart, and I can hold it there, and without ever having any thoughts of sexuality or addictions or any of the low self promptings like greed or avarice or control or domination or anything like that. It just allows your set point to rise along with your own personal work. I still maintain that even with your clearing, people need to clear the habitual patterns and programs out of themselves, out of their system, because we literally are like biocomputers, and everything that we've ever experienced or literally, well, how can I say it? The low self animal consciousness of the morphogenic field we exist in around here is primarily patterned to the low self and not the high self. We have to learn and earn our way into the high self and to raise that set point where we automatically are. When I wake up in the morning, I'm already in my high self. I don't have to think about going through that period of, like I used to, of getting back into the high self and functional in civilization again.
Yes, and I noticed the difference also after I did those sessions. And then when we integrate all that, then we do the karmic matrix reabsorption, which is the activation of the divinity. I don't know if I don't think I've done that on you yet, so I have to do that. That's going to be for next time. So then we hold the space and reabsorb the karmic matrix directly back into the source. And that session can be 3 hours long. And sometimes it takes 2 days because maybe somebody has like an hour and a half or an hour and a half. So it depends. And then it depends if the body can take it as well. And it actually permits the activation of the divine qualities and the fifth dimensional experiences that can rapidly manifest into oneself afterwards. So just remember that I have to do that on you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another thing I recognize is that with the clarity and the shift in the set point into the higher chakra ranges, it doesn't bother me any longer to be around people who are focused in their low self qualities. It's like I can feel their negativity, but nothing they say or do or resonate affects me. I can stay in the high state and become the observer of their situations and assist them in their healing or clearing work without being affected by it. And by affected, I'm talking about, it used to be with clairsentience, I could walk into a room full of people and download every negative thing in there, and I could leave feeling horrible, negative thinking, negative thoughts and opinions and ideas, and then talking to people, I could get caught up in their negative conversation of how bad everything was and how the world was going to hell and all their family problems and just stuff. That does not affect me anymore. I can step back and listen to their conversations, and I can observe it. I can understand it. I can intellectually analyze it and instantly know what to do to help them to overcome that negativity or do the clearing work. But then it's gone. When I step out of their field, they just disappear, and I no longer download things like that. Do you experience that kind of a situation in your life?
What I realize is as the energies are getting a lot easier, like when I trained as a shaman, I spent 14 years with a shaman and I had to do lots of ceremonies. I had to do a lot of things because the energies were a lot denser. I found that those who are born after 87 also have already a lighter energy. And then after 2017, obviously they are very young, but there's a big step up every time in different levels. They don't come in with the etheric or crystals that we came in with. That stops us from being clairvoyant and clairaudient. And funny enough, those crystals can, if we have any accidents, can etherically break as well, just like a regular crystal. And that would give different pains, aches and pains, and especially migraines. And I healed a lot of people from when I do the light body surgery, if they have different pains in their body. So it's a lot easier to go to the higher dimensions now, and to go to be more in touch with our oversoul.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we're facing out here in the general consciousness in raising the frequency is teaching people how to understand or become aware of their own systems and how their systems are responding to the field of energy that they are in and around and participate in. In other words, learning to recognize when someone is pulling you down into their density, and feeling that and shielding yourself from that interchange of energy that occurs with density, particularly healers, people who are trying to either counsel or energetically heal others, or people who do readings of others, and anytime you open your energy field to someone else, even in a conversation, you're subjected to whatever they have patterned in their system, and whatever their set point is. And so with that awareness of protecting yourself, you could create a radiance or a field in your orb, your aura, with intent to be the observer and to participate without energetically opening up and emotionally opening your emotional channel, so your frequencies are pulled down to whatever their level is. And this is not an easy thing to do, because first of all, you need to be sensitive to your own systems and things that are affecting you, and learning how to shield yourself and shield your orb from the general consciousness out here, because folks, it's a swamp out there. It really is. And you don't have to be pulled down on a daily or hourly or minutely affected by it. You can act and interact in the world and be effective in raising the consciousness around you, because as long as you hold your set point in that high radiance level, that's what your shielding will do for you. We're at the top of the hour now. Let's take a quick break, Gaz, and then when we come back, we'll talk about shielding and clearing and how to check yourself to see if you have any indwellers, or if you're a healer, how to clear indwellers out of others, and what we can do to raise the level of consciousness about the low self. Okay?
How so?
Knowing the
More about gel coat.
When the fourth round would
Don't you call in the
More importantly, he knew what he was talking about.
Oh, does it look good already? Okay. Jumbo Scampi for limited.
All for a price that will make you.
How the hell am I supposed to pay?
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to People for People Radio, the voice of truth in Scotland.
Okay, we're back again. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there in our listening audience, or will be in the future, concerning the subject. It is not a well-known field in the world of healing, the understanding about the low self and how the low self can translocate around within people, primarily in families. But it's a very important quality of healing, an essence of healing, an essential of healing, if we're going to attain full functional bodies in persons, give them the understanding of how to take care of themselves. And basic to that is just learning how to recognize feelings and energies and how to isolate them, and learning the clearing the way technique of when you have your point of attention on something in your linear mind, when you're thinking about something, there's a direct resonance to wherever that energy is stored within your system, whether it's a thought form, a shock, a trauma, even the information or knowledge. When you're thinking about something with your conscious mind, you can feel where it's stored in your body. And when you feel it, if it's a negative that you want to clear, you simply wrap your awareness around it in the body while you're keeping your point of attention on it with your mind, and you push it out. Desire and will and intent. Your intent is to clear that program out of your system. Your desire is to be free of it. And your will is your power of energetically directing whatever goes on in your reality. You can clear it, you can release it, you can neutralize it, you can deprogram it. But that's the fundamental system of clearing negativity out of your system. It's always essential, or it helps to pull in through your crown chakra by taking your point of attention up into your oversoul to pull in the opposite pattern of whatever it is you're releasing. Pull it in and pull it down and download it into your system to take up the space that the negative pattern was holding. In other words, if you have a negative thought, you replace it with a positive thought. If you have a negative experience, you clear the negative experience and replace it with a positive experience. Fear, anger, anxiety, stress, all of these things are carried in the system until they're dealt with. That's what karma is. It's what stress is holding on, your body holding on, your subconscious, your low self-mind, to these patterns and forms. And another thing to understand about this is that these are, they're stored as these thought forms or patterns are stored as these energy packets that I'm talking about, because our low self, our physical energy, everything but our mind is in the quantum field. It's in the quantum field. And the quantum field, all energy is focused in the now. Everything is occurring now. So when you have a shock or a trauma or a abuse stored in your system somewhere that ultimately builds up because it needs to be addressed, needs to be cleared, needs to be corrected and rectified, and it's stored there as one of these little packets of energy. And those packets of energy are interrupting the natural harmonious patterns of energy, or the happiness and joy that you should be experiencing in life. So when you detect one of these things, you can just take that little packet of energy and visualize it as wrapping your awareness around it and just taking it right straight out forward through the torus, a spinning black hole, back to its source, or back into energy or unorganized, because it's just organized patterns of energy. But it will affect you and will continue to affect you right unto death until you deal with it. So when you bring the energy packets back in to replace it with, all you do is think about a positive, wonderful experience, or the opposite of whatever, like if your father spanked you, and you remember that, and you do, take that packet of energy out and replace it with your Father hugging you and loving you, and feel the energy that you pull down through your crown chakra. Feel it in the area where you cleared the negativity out. So that's the best way I know of telling you how to do your clearing work. There are lots of other techniques and patterns, but I know most people who do any kind of counseling work or healing work or give advice and things like that, they don't work enough with the energetic patterns. They don't spend enough time or understand how to teach others how to do their own healing work. And that's always been the focus of my healing work, is not just to heal a person, but to teach them how to heal themselves and others. Because understanding how the system works, that our indwelling high soul is just a linear consciousness that works with our brain, as our high self-consciousness, intelligence, spirituality, our identity of self, and the linear form of conversation or intelligence or rationale and thinking, those processes are all linear, but they all rise and are stored in your systems in the quantum field, which is little packets of energy. And it's just like reaching into yourself when you detect one of these things and wrapping your fingers around it. And if you want to visualize that, you can too. And taking it out, get it out of your system, deprogram it, drag it to trash, just like you would with a computer. Now, are there any questions concerning any of this? We like to work with the listening audience, so if there are any questions concerning any of these practices, and this clearing the way process is unlimited in what you can do with it. You can clear negative entities out of yourself the same way. Other living life form consciousnesses that may be invasive and taking you over, you can, as long as you're aware of it, you can wrap your energy around it and take that packet of energy out of yourself. Entities and things are more invasive than general thought forms because they are formulated living essences of consciousness, like a disincarnate living being, and there can be any number of types of negative entities or energies that you want to clear out of yourself so it doesn't affect your thinking, your health, your vitality, your life. And just the same way you create a happy thought in yourself, you do that all up in the linear, and then internalize it because you feel when you're thinking a happy thought or joy or thinking of a loved one, you feel that in your body, and what you're feeling, what you're emotionally programming. The more energy of emotion you can put with it, the stronger the permanence of the healing is. Okay, we have a healing request. Vincent in far northern Queensland, Australia. Pisces has thyroid imbalance, not on medication, experiences depression, trying to find a spiritual purpose in life. Well, if Vincent is listening, I just told you how to heal yourself, Vincent, by using the clearing the way techniques. Focus on your thyroid, move your point of attention to the thyroid, step back into your memory banks by extending your awareness down through your system and see what there is in your experience in your life that interrupting or interfering with your joy of life. And when you feel that, take your point of awareness to it. It's just a packet of energy. Clear it out, release it, get it out of your system, and then replace it with a happy, positive thing. Because thyroid is a gland that controls our nervous energy and a whole lot of other things that the balancing our systems. And when the thyroid's not in balance, it disrupts a lot of other things. Like you mentioned, depression. Depression is stored in the upper chest and in the throat. So when you think about the things that have depressed you in the past, emotional things that you experienced, traumas, bad relationships, abuse, when you think about that with your frontal lobe of your brain, you'll feel it in your upper chest, around your heart. Gather those entities up and clear them out with the intent of balancing and healing your thyroid. That's interesting. We can do it right now. Everyone out there who is experiencing depression, energy, denseness, and heaviness in your lungs, upper chest, think about the things. Oh my goodness, I'm picking up 1,000 thought forms that are coming back. Push it out, clear it out, get it out of there. Gather up the energy off of the memory, because as long as you can have the memory, but if you don't have the energy there to sustain it, it can't affect you. The energy of the emotion of the trauma is there as your personal karma or karma with someone else. It's just there to remind you that it needs to be balanced and cleared. So clear it, release it, let it go through the power of the Christ within us. I always like to use that little mantra because that shifts your point of identity into your spiritual consciousness, your oversoul and your high soul, through the power of the Christ. And I'm talking about not Jesus Christ, but the Christed energy of consciousness, the higher consciousness of spirituality that Jesus was and represented. Through the power of the Christ within us, we see this Victor's thyroid in a perfect and normal condition. We totally release all the negativity in his life that he's carrying with him. More importantly, we teach Victor how to do it for himself. Internalize that, Victor, and feel that lesson internalizing with the intent and having the intent to clear and heal yourself. It's very simple. It is so simple. It's incredible. And then pull in joy and life and abundance, all the positive things you want to experience in life. Pull that down from your oversoul with the intent to implant that in your system to become a resonant energy that you are expressing in life. You see, when you have depression and negativity and fear and lack of abundance and all of negativity that we can experience and download in life, when that is the primary thing resonating in your system, that's resonating into your future. And it's in the creating standing waves in the future, which will allow you to continue to experience that until you recognize it and heal it. When you clear this stuff, replace it with love and power and joy and peace and abundance, that becomes your resonance, that you're resonating into the future, and becomes the attractive field that creates that reality for you. And it is very true. We create our reality every moment of choice.
Perfectly done. I find that a lot of people, myself included, when I'm clearing things out, is I have to remind myself that I've already lived through it once. I don't need to redo the energy of the emotion again for the lesson to be a part of me. And in that memory of realization brings the joy and happiness of, yeah, I've already done this. I don't have to do it again.
Perfect. Anytime you're being introspective or have a quiet moment to yourself and thoughts begin to come up in your head, memories of old shocks and traumas or negative interactions with other people, anytime, that's just your subconscious mind throwing that stuff up to be dealt with because it's stress in your body. And your subconscious wants to get rid of it. Once you begin working with these clearing away techniques, man, your subconscious will pardon the expression, puke the stuff up. So you get rid of it.
And also there's the realization of, is it your depression and grief and, discontent, or are you picking up on somebody else's energy?
There you go. Or is it a pattern from your mom or your dad or your family or something else that you downloaded even intrauterine? Okay. Thank you, Victor. That was a good one. And Tim Goodall asked, can this technique be used to assist with addictions? Yes. Tim, if you have an addiction, think back to the first time you ever tried that substance, whatever it is, whether it's a cigarette or some kind of drug or something, out of curiosity, and you experienced an upper. It felt good. It altered your reality. It helped you to quit thinking about the negative things in your life or negative self-perception. So many teenagers with a negative self-perception, it's like taking a drink of alcohol. It makes you feel different. You forget you're feeling bad. You're deadening the effect of the energy fields in you that are in disharmony or self-dislike or pattern or whatever it is. So if you think back in time to the conditions when you started the addiction and think about how you felt then, even now you instantaneously feel the way you felt then. That's the power of the mind, is that everything that ever happened in the past is still right there in your standing waves of reality and pattern into your system, your hard disk, and you can bring it right back. So clear it out. Clear it out. Clear out those negative teenage years when you felt bad about yourself, or you didn't think anybody liked you, or you lost a love, or you failed somehow. Everything that has to do with negative self-worth is the basis of addiction, because you became addicted or tried the addiction, the substance, no matter what it was, to feel better or to fit in, to belong, like at a party, like with the teenagers in the car drinking beer. You fit in, you belong, people like you. They couldn't see how badly, what a negative person you are, or how you felt about yourself. Go back into those times and clear those energies out. It's a lifetime of negative accumulation that makes you go back to the addiction again and again and again. Yeah, you can clear it out. Then replace it with how good you feel about yourself. Bring in positive feelings and self-love and self-validation. Every time I do a clearing session with people and we clear out a lot of negative patterns and programs, I show them how to pull in the positive opposite or more things that you need to pull in things that you've never experienced, because the pattern is all there in your potential, in your oversoul. By pulling in the positive opposite and the positive experience you want to have, that becomes your resonance into your future that will attract that. It creates it. Remember, we think past, present, and future, but in the quantum field, it is all now. Everything is now. And we experience it as linearly, just simply so we could experience life out here in a linear way.
As you were talking, Frank, I was envisioning when people feel bad about themselves and that it's like a magnet. It just attracts all the negativity that they think and feel about themselves and what other people have said to them. You know, like a magnet, and it all just sticks to them. And I was thinking of a funny visualization then, that perhaps they should put some kind of a board somewhere, like their front door or something, so that whatever, negativity they had is going to go stick to this board or something, another magnet, so that they don't take it into their home with them.
If you feel bad about yourself and you feel ugly or don't fit in, or any of the negative potentials we could express, and you take that out into your field of consciousness and interact with others, that's what you're going to get back, is people who will reinforce that in you, because they will be prompted to do something, say something, even to the point of just ignoring you, that you will take personally and reinforce that. So if you go out like you do, Catherine, when you walk out the door and your light and your self-love and your power and radiate that, you don't attract negativity, do you? You attract just people that turn on and feel good about themselves and feel wonderful after they've interacted with you.
Yep, it's a two-way street, and I like putting out what I put out because I get it back.
Exactly. Let's go to Teresa and get her in on this conversation. She is a radiant bundle of joy herself. Teresa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for sharing all of this, and Angel's contribution was just over the top as well. She has so much to offer. I have questions for Angel also, but the topic on addiction that we were just talking about, just recently I was listening to a YouTube on a Canadian doctor by the name of Dr. Gobel Mate, Gobol Mate, and he talks about addictions. He spent he's a medical doctor. He's spent years in hospitals and also even on the street in Vancouver with people with addictions, and he talks a lot about like depression, addiction, anxiety, and particular stress, and those energies that we take on or are introduced to and kind of overwhelm us, he talks about as attachments. So attachment or disconnection. He talks about how attachments, we require attachments on as human beings. We require attachment in childhood with the parent to be validated, appreciated, and loved. And if we can't get that, then we look for that from peers. And in our young years, if we attach to peers, then that sort of attaches to the low soul mentality, which can be challenging because it's not matured, or go to substances. And when we don't receive that attachment of validation and appreciation and love and so on, the substance is very much of a low soul way of satiating that lack and like self-worth. And in the addiction realm or high anxiety, high stress realm, when we get to that point where we believe that we can no longer cope, there is a disconnection to that. And I know that I do it myself. I mean, I've never been tested for mental illness, but I know that I have, I disconnect when I'm unable to or don't feel comfortable in connecting with what the situation is. And, I'm sure I would be rated, on a spectrum of some sort. But the disconnect part is not knowing how to cope, or it becomes a pattern of our realities, and then we feel we're so addicted that we cannot even control it anymore. And it's exciting to be a part of this teaching and this learning, to learn how to examine the depths of what what Frank's focusing on, and to go to that root cause. Again, Dr. Gobel Mate said that in the allopathic realm, they don't recognize emotion as part of illness or disease, but it becomes blatantly obvious that the root of our any kind of imbalance is that lack, that imbalance in the emotion, the trauma. And he also refers to it as like a trauma is an unhealed wound. And it's absolutely a brilliant way to look at it. I mean, we look at trauma as kind of a shocking word in a way that carries its own energy. Pardon me. And but if we look at it as an unhealed wound, we can go and search intuitively, search where in our bodies do we feel that discordant energy, and focus on it and think about, replacing, take away the discomfort, pushing it out, recognizing it first of all, and then pushing it out, but replacing it with those feelings of energy that are comforting to us as basic human beings, and this releasing the memories of the stresses that go with it, and the reaction that we have when we are, look at the word depression. It is a stress where we are not authentic anymore, and we depress our true state, and so when we are in that state of healing, we are really becoming more authentic beings. So it's worth a peek in YouTube to look at his works. He seems to be very groundbreaking, and it very much in alignment with the work that Frank has been teaching us, and the work that goes along with the shamanic works that Angel talks about. The language may be different, but the actions are deep, and they're layers and layers deep, and they're caverns of realities that we're just discovering or rediscovering, and it's just endlessly fascinating, in my opinion. So I want to thank everybody for all of their contributions, and so that's my little tidbit, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Teresa. And it's so true that if you look back in our history, this last 26,000 years in this cycle that is ending now, our whole human reality has been in stress, in challenge, in struggle to survive, struggle to understand, clearing negativity so that positivity could express, and looking at the thousands of ways that people who did come through with positive and uplifting creations or understanding or awareness, how much negativity would struggle to tear those back down again and bring it back down to their own comfort zone and level. But we're coming to a point now where the whole process has been one of learning. And I looked at this one time. I went, asked Spirit, I went underneath the dynamics of why in the world did humans have to go through so much to learn? And the answer I got back was very clear, very simple. Well, because we are co-creators of God, and we're rising up through the frequency ranges of our potential of our chakra system, we're ultimately going to be gods, and gods that can create everything. And this is what our God has been experiencing in our cosmos out here, in our universe, in all the different human forms and experiences. And the learning process, the self-realization is that you don't really understand negativity and the potential of your power, and how damaging and destructive you can be with just a thought, because every thought has power and creativity. And when we get more powerful, more creative thoughts, we have the potential of not only stopping evolution in its tracks, but destroying human consciousness, and not just humans. There's thousands of other species out there with intelligence that are evolving also. So the necessity is to try everything out, everything possible through choice. And that's the benefit of choice, is wrong choices create a karma with it. Every wrong choice creates a karma that ultimately has to be self-realized and corrected in order to learn how to make only right choices, and the right choices that empower everyone else and give dignity to our evolving consciousness and form. So we are growing and evolving by our experiences, and even negative self-worth can be learned if we will learn how to self-realize what it is that is causing our feelings, causing us to be bad, or clearing the experiences that created that negative thought in the first place, and then creating the positive opposite. That's the lesson. It's very simple.
Very much so. I remember as a child or teenager growing up, my mom would say to me, "Catherine, remember, people will always try to pull you down to their level." And I never understood that as a teen. And now as I'm growing up and I'm seeing on how people act and react and what I do, what they do, and so forth, I am under the understanding that it is easy to be pulled down into the muck. than to reach and raise somebody up into the light, because they don't really want to come, because it's work, it's hard, to unstick yourself from things and to let go of this. Call it the ego emotions and so forth. But it's so worthwhile having clear eyes and clear thoughts and clear feelings of knowing that this is how we all are to be. This is what we're all capable of being. And everything else is a learning experience. And we do the steps. We go at our own rate, because we all will clear off the so-called muck and get rid of all of this and so forth. If your eyes are open and your ears are open and your heart is open, you'll understand that you need to start working with clearing it out of yourself first, and not taking on other people's, and then you can help them to rid themselves of theirs also. Life is good and beautiful. It's fabulous.
That's exactly right, Catherine. And when I first became a healer and began to discover the powers that I had, and exploring ways of utilizing that power, at first, of course, because of ego and self-awareness, my ego was tremendously gratified just because I could heal somebody out there. But then I had to learn the lessons that there's a point and purpose for every gift and every ability, and how we use those gifts and abilities are actually the creative force that manifests our entire reality out here. And so as my frequency range has risen and my set point has risen, I can look now with pure open consciousness out to everyone else. And the energy that comes and rises in me, it's not a feeling of being self-gratified or so pleased with myself. It's a feeling of compassion, that we can look out and see the world as it is, look at our human history, and everything that humans have gone through in the process of self-realization, of learning to make right choice, how to become the gods that we really are, and how to earn and learn as we go, and raise that set point up to where we're not attracting or pulling from the past any of the negativity, but we're just focused in the future and to what we can attract and create. And the phenomenal thing is that we've only risen in consciousness up through 2 or 3 of our levels of consciousness. And I'm talking about the world in general out here. And our DNA is reassembling to support that level of the general consciousness. Our indwelling soul is only indwelling to that degree of support. And so as we clear and learn and grow and raise the set point up the chakra system, more DNA turns on, more oversoul can indwell, more and more and more, higher and higher and higher. As we raise in frequency, we gain power and ability and gifts of consciousness, and that we can become the stable creators of our reality. And then when I looked at that with self-realization, the thought occurred to me, why are we doing all this? What is happening here? And I allowed myself to open up into the future and could see this great clarity, why we're doing this. And the whole point is that we're aspects of God, the children of God, growing up through maturity and experience through hundreds of millions of years here of soul growth and consciousness, the evolution of awareness and consciousness, until we experience every potential that this universe has to offer us. And then guess what? We step back out and create other universes. and get to experience it all in a different way until all the potentials have been realized in all lives and realities, frequency ranges, dimensions. Isn't that an exciting thought, that we are immortal and all the best is yet to come? And I've always known that in this lifetime, that no matter what I did, whatever I learned, where I was at, wherever my set point was experiencing, there's always more, and the best is yet to come. And so it is.
Agree.
Gas has written a question, and he states, "It is said that we are approaching the fifth dimension. Some folks may pass into the fifth. What is the expectation of reaching the fifth, and how will we know if we get there? And what happens to the folks that do not transcend?"
Well, that's going to be the surprise, isn't it? In other words, I'm saying that no matter what our expectations are based on our histories of the past, we have no way of knowing that future out there because we've not had an opportunity to experience it yet. It's not part of our co-creative consciousness. And so as we're looking ahead, moving into that fifth dimension, it's going to be exactly what we want it to be, what we create, what we are, what we're resonating. And that's looking out beyond that to all the other human societies that have evolved and antecedent to us. It's all been done before. And our pathway along following their pathway is to iron out the wrinkles, correct any mistakes that they have made in that process. So that in the mind of God, there's nothing left unorganized to the highest and best potential of the ultimate experience of that God force. So we don't worry about it. We just know it's there and move forward with that expectation that it's going to be wonderful. And with that expectation, that's what we'll attract and create.
It is not a race. And it is, just as she said, Frank, it's, you just do the best that you can. You do the best you can. Be the best that you can be. And don't do because you can, and you know that you can, and it makes you feel good because you can. And I mean by forgiving and being kind to others and understanding and having compassion. You just do because you can, with nothing expected in the end, because there is no end. It just is.
In asking that question, Gaz, as I look at that, it brings my attention to you. What do you want it to be? How do you see your world of the future? Well, it will be what it will be. Angel, fill us in here. You master the past. What do we do to master the future?
We're all going to make it. We're all going to make it together. And I'm very hopeful about what's going to happen as well. And like I was saying just before the show, I feel this year is the start of a great year as far as I can see. And from what I've seen in the future, we're all going to make it together. So there's not going to be anybody left behind. Because, as you said earlier, our souls have different expressions. And we've all lived in other dimensions. The expression of our soul on this planet at the moment is only a certain aspect of our soul. But there are numerous aspects of our souls in different realities, in different planets. And so this planet is actually fabulous. It's amazing in the sense that it's a place where we can grow faster than other places and other realities. So it's quite challenging, but it's also very beautiful. So that's my answer.
Okay. Well, we're all experiencing a wonderful unified field here of consciousness now, having addressed some of the conflicts and confusions of what we've been in the past and what we can do to correct those conflicts and expressions and how we can bring it forward into our new reality. So it all comes down to one basic premise. The energy source that we experience as light, which has all frequencies of potential in it, and which ultimately evolves no matter what color you pick out in all those frequency potentials and ranges, and the experiences of that frequency range. It's all a progression. It's all movement. That even though some things happen and are created to pull us back down through the frequency ranges and colors and potentials, the ultimate creator that holds the form of all things allows, particularly on this planet, freedom of choice. And we keep hearing that our humans, are the first that have been given freedom of choice to see what we would do with it. We're a great experiment in the spiritual consciousness and in the worlds, and even of those who have gone before us, the extraterrestrials, that in this great experience of human genetics and consciousness that we're given the opportunity to gain understanding and growth through experience. And so by experiencing all things possible, leaving nothing unrealized or expressed, that's the fullest experience of life that I can think of. And as we evolve ahead, growing and going and releasing, creating with expectation and hope, always hope, the hope and of self-realization in a higher level of understanding and consciousness. That's all that's expected of us. because if we rushed ahead up through the potentials of this, and self-realized the highest levels of our chakras, our DNA, we would miss out on so much experience, so much time. And this is the ageless self-realization we're having now, is that we have plenty of time. It doesn't all have to be done in this lifetime. We just have to be the best that we can so that we don't have to repeat it and go through it again and again and again as we have in the past in our incarnations. We're moving to a point now to where every level we attain will bring with it the acceleration and growth of consciousness, so negativity can be left behind. And also with that comes the self-realization that every level will bring challenges. It'll give us the opportunity to experience the negative potential of whatever we evolve into. That won't be left behind. But what we're gaining is the wisdom of self-realization. And that's what we old souls bring with us, is the wisdom of self-realization, that we don't have to go through this again in the way that we have, that our futures are pure potential. We are the masters of that potential, and that's what masters are. Mastery simply means mastering yourself, because when you've mastered yourself, you've mastered everything out there without end. And now we're coming to the end of our hour. Catherine, will you give us a passage of love?
Breathe in the love you feel outside into your heart. So wonderful. Close your eyes, open up, and be what you want to be. Know that you get to choose the way you will feel. Choose it well, my dear ones. I love you in this field. Bye-bye.
Teresa?
Blessings to the infinite beings that we all are.
Angel?
All of the joy, clarity, and aliveness you long for have always been within you, right here, right now.
And so it is. Thank you, Gaz, and we look forward to our next session and whatever that brings us, because every session is just one step higher in self-realization. And I, for one, live for that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And whatever we missed today in information, please pose questions so that we can answer them in our next sessions. This is a progression of consciousness we're all experiencing together. Thank you. Bye now.